Mr. Michiel Sintenie from Vattenfall about infrastructure for smart meter data.
Yeah.
Give him a round of applause.
So who's using energy? Wow, everybody. So this is the challenge that you want to work on. We are trying to build a new infrastructure for together with the teams that are also participating on a new digital infrastructure for our energy system in Europe. We have some really interesting people in the panel that agree on one thing, that improvement is possible, but disagree on everything else. So if you want to have an interesting panel discussion, please come to our stage and ask the right questions to our panelists.
First a question, why is data important for the energy transition? Well, actually that's very simple. Everybody recognizes that today we have an energy system which is demand driven. If we want more energy, more lamps, then the coal plants or the traditional generation needs to work a little bit faster. Actually we're transforming towards a supply driven energy system. That means that if there is a lot of sun, as Jan said, well then the energy might be cheap, and if there is less, the energy might be a little more expensive. When we keep that in mind and we see what's going on, then the traditional way how we run the system will be unaffordable. So that means that we have to steer on demand response, vraagsturing in the Dutch. And in order to interact with all the customers who have the demand, you need data. Otherwise you cannot run the system. So that's basically for the question. I put in 90 seconds three slides. I'm not going to talk every single line on that. You read it and get inspired by it. There's three basic takeaways what I say. First of all, there's a fundamental reflection required on what is happening on the grid edge. Only focusing on the smart meter itself is just a silo solution. There's a lot of things more happening. There are sub-meters, charging poles, there are smart inverters. So the question is, how do we work with data which is coming out of the grid edge? That's the first one. Then the second one is there is a smart meter roadmap urgently required. I show you this one. Actually, we, as grid operators, we implemented all the smart meters, and actually all the customers pay them in the tariffs. I think it cost more than €1 billion the last 7 years. And my biggest nightmare is that by 2022 or 2023, we go back to the ministry and say, well, maybe ask all the customers another €1 billion because we have to replace them all. Because there are new requirements coming on the technology, 5G, new requirements from the market, real time, which I think are reasonable requirements, and also the legislation on GDPR of AVG is coming on, and those meters don't fit, so replace them all. So the challenge for us is, can we be smart and think about a roadmap where we can put with some add-on technology, leverage the existing investments, so that keeps the cost for the customer low, while at the same time accommodating all the new requirements. And then we say, well, actually, what we think is, well, we had a dumb meter in 2000, and we said we need a smart meter, so we put software in it, and actually now we are on the reverse route. Well, we see, well, maybe we should make the meter dumb again, and actually don't call it a meter anymore, but call it an IoT sensor, and put on top of it a small edge computing platform which communicates with a cloud computing platform where you could do everything in it. So edge and cloud computing is very important. The issue here is, if somebody would come up with, well, I have a nice idea on such an edge computing device, don't come with a device which costs €1,000 because we have to put it on top of a smart meter of €60. That was a big supply in the European market. Said, well, can you sell you some for €1,000? That doesn't work. Then the third other way around. The third element is the traditional way of thinking is, and that is also how regulation was set up, you have before the smart meter and after the smart meter. The grid operators own the smart meter and run the grid and all the data which is coming out of there, and behind the smart meter, well, there's the public domain, and that's where the grid operator don't go in, and that is just data which goes to the market. The statement what I make here is that in the future, access to data and data sharing will actually become independent of who owns the infrastructure. And actually on that topic, we are working in the Netherlands together. We're in the same team. on what we call an afsprakenstelsel, a sharing of data schemes, etc. Actually, we stole some concepts from the financial sector. We said, well, in the future, data will be available everywhere, from sub-meters, from meters, from smart inverters, etc. And whether you get access is not defined by the infrastructure, but whether you are allowed and have consent legally or by the customer to get access to the data. And that's the third point I would like to give you away on this, and thinking about what you're going to do in this hackathon.
Thank you for your explanation. Yeah, I will keep the microphone here. Do we have a mic in the? Yeah, great. What we try to do is set an example here in the Netherlands how the digital infrastructure could work for Europe. So we already have some arrangement made with my colleagues in Sweden that are responsible for the DSO part to also look into the solution that is well, the prototypes that are built in the hackathon, and see if we can bring that also to Sweden, to their data hub that they are creating there. And well, we have some people also from Germany, and they don't have a smart meter yet, but there is a big rollout coming. So this could also be set an example how to really design your infrastructure in a good way with a privacy by design solution. I want to open the room for questions. So is there anyone who wants to open the first question? Please tell your name and company and your question.
Hi, George Eigenaar, CGI. I have a question about the actual hackathon. Could you say something about the sandbox or systems that are available to us during the hackathon?
Yeah, so we have to prepare a lot of well, data. We have data sets from smart meters from the past years. They are also available. So if you enter our challenge, we have an extensive call in March, and there we are asking the teams what kind of data do you need, and then we can arrange the data that is needed. Because in the first hackathon we had a huge sandbox with a lot of data and nothing was used. So that was and it was a hassle to get all the data. So now we move to asking the teams what kind of data do you need, and can we provide. So some teams want data from Sweden, so we get the smart energy data from Sweden, and some teams want to have like TSO data from Germany, for example. So those are the things that we come up when you are allowed to come to the hackathon with your team, and we have a thorough discussion on what your needs are. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Farah from ABN AMRO Clearing, covering energy initiatives within innovation. I had a question for you. You did mention that at some point we might go into some sort of a pricing that gives us, when wind and solar is abundant, to zero pricing. But currently we have this day and night tariff with a very small delta. When do you think we will have such an exposure to spot pricing, and what will be the trigger moving forward?
Yeah. Just see if it's on. Yeah, it's on. From a legislative perspective, the European directive, electricity directive, I think it's describing that from 2021, I think on, that the larger energy companies should offer time of use pricing. From a market perspective, it's still a bit to be seen how the market develops. I think at the moment the spread is not that large, but that can develop, especially when there is more renewable energy coming into place.
Maybe a little bit discussion. I visited Estonia in the eastern part of Europe. There it is already very common. So I question a little bit whether it's a regulatory obligation or whether it's the proposition from the market. Because today you could go already, I think, to dynamic pricing if the market parties want that. And I think there's also a misunderstanding that for dynamic pricing you need real-time data. Of course, if a market party or a supplier would say we go for dynamic pricing, then at least the pricing should be at 15-minute intervals, because we don't measure smaller intervals. But if I think a market party would communicate to the market through its websites its prices per quarter, then I think the customer could decide whether to go on that or not. Then there is an interesting challenge still to be solved. If there's a lot of energies available, because a lot of wind and a lot of sun, then the suppliers would say, well, we reduce the tariff, so we stimulate everybody to use the energy. And on the moment there is not storage yet that, because it's not a financial viable solution on the moment, that for the grid operators create then at the same time no problem. So that is because then it gets a peak in the load on the grid, and that the capacity is not there. So that interaction challenge is still something which I think the regulator has to address. What is a fair deal?
Yeah, we're playing on 4 different chessboards with the frequency control and the congestion and the money flow. So there are a lot of different things working together or against each other in the energy system. Maybe some people say, well, it's the most complex system a human has ever built.
Yeah, I think just to add one example, at the moment, I believe it's in Amsterdam, we're already offering smart charging, so that the price at night is cheaper than the price during daytime, and that might evolve further on to maybe in a few years' time 15 minutes pricing. But at the moment, we are offering this.
Yeah, it's called flex power.
And is this creating already for you congestion on the grid?
Yeah.
Well, Amsterdam is Alliander area.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So
I think it's not the case.
It is. It's a coalition with Leander, with the municipality of Amsterdam, and Vattenfall, and they are doing it with the world charging station. So steering the grid on congestion and tempering the charging station when there's congestion coming up. They will release the grid. By not charging cars
This triggers a very interesting discussion which is emerging in Europe the next coming years, because today for a grid tariff everybody pays the same tariff independent where you live, and the discussions are going, should we make the grid tariff dependent on the load of the grid. So if you live in an area where the capacity is scarce and there's a lot of load, then you pay more for your grid as somewhere else. And the question is whether that is socially seen an acceptable solution or not. That's a political question.
Yeah, well, we already have it for the gas connection points already. Are there other questions?
Etienne Join from NG. Is it okay? Okay. You mentioned smart meters as IoTs. Ultimately, there are a lot of IoTs that are perfectly capable of measuring consumption for a small price. What, in my mind, differentiates a smart meter from an IoT is the fact that you can invoice somebody on the basis of data measured by smart meters, and you cannot do it with a simple IoT. But technically, it seems similar. So, but there must be difference, of course, which makes the difference in price. So, my question is if in this challenge the participants will be enticed to think about IoTs beyond the meter systems that can connect to the main data infrastructure, or is the whole question only about smart meters?
Yeah, so this is a thing that we thought about. How can we scope the challenge a little bit that it's suitable for 84 hours development and not like solving the whole world of energy problems that we face. So this will be one of the pieces of the big puzzle that we have to make. And I'm really glad that like 30% of the challenges of this year is contained with the energy and the energy data infrastructure. So that's good. And there are several challenges solving several puzzles. And I think that after the hackathon, we have to team up and see if we can put the puzzle pieces together and to collaborate to solve that bigger issue that we have with energy transition and weather dependent production.
May I-
But this is purely focused on the P4 port in the Dutch and in the Swedish market. So yeah.
May I add something? Because I have to stick to the scope you said. But that is the assignment. But of course, it would be wise to think about, okay, if we within the scope do this, is this then expandable in a roadmap which goes beyond?
Exactly. Yeah.
Hello, Alex Powell from Kaifa Metering, subject matter expert in smart metering in Europe. I get the feeling that we say goodbye to the P1 interface a little bit too quickly. Could you elaborate why the penetration of P1 devices is so small in the Netherlands, where we see that also Sweden, Belgium adopted the P1 interface?
Yeah, maybe you should give the answer, because your comment was a little bit surprising for me as well, because I think in the Netherlands the specification of the smart meter, every smart meter has a P1. So today there is a P1 in every household. The question is whether everybody uses the P1. But to my understanding, every smart meter is equipped with a P1 interface.
Yeah. So why not P1? If you look at the solutions that we already have in the Netherlands since the first rollout of the smart meter, there is a solution to get high frequency data connection with the dongle into your smart meter. And I'm not an expert, I'm just watching from the outside. We also built a device that was connected, like a gateway. Eneco also had built a device, Oxio built a device. So everybody's building devices that connect to the P1 port. And you see that people, well, the early adopters and innovators, they're using those kind of tools. But if you want to get not only 500,000 people, but everybody on board, you need to use the system that's currently available and currently connected to, well, the backbone of the energy data system, and the system that is working and is, how do you say that, approved to bill on it or invoice on it. And so that's why I choose to focus on the P4 port, because there are a lot of solutions in the P1 domain for this, but it's not working for everybody. So I wanted to create it inclusive. And
the real question is, why is it not working today? And why is the penetration so small?
I have no idea.
And could an inclusive P1 device also help to solve this problem?
Maybe.
The question, I think, but what I've been seeing is that if you want to scale up the use of more real-time data, streaming data, and then at least it's about the costs, etc. And then, well, there was a discussion a few years ago that the grid operator said, okay, let's socialize the cost. We pay for the device. Well, at that time, so well, the grid operators and commercial market parties, that's not your role. So stay out of it. But indeed, if in the future, if market parties would say, okay, we don't want to bear the cost, let the grid operators pay the cost, that could be a route to scale up. And at the same time, it would also, from a customer perspective, create choice. Because today, a lot of solutions, as you mentioned, they're all proprietary solutions. And Eco has the tone, and NEDU has something else, and everybody has dedicated stuff. And then, as a customer, you are stuck, because if you say, "Well, I switch to another supplier," well, all this gear doesn't work anymore. And on the moment you have a standardized solution which is socialized in cost. Then when you have a cloud solution where all the data is coming available, then also the new startups could have access to that data, and not only the companies who have the big money to invest in the infrastructure.
Yeah. And one of the really important things that we also try to solve with this challenge is the communication layer from the smart meter towards the database or the cloud solution that we already have. So unfortunately, or maybe lucky for us, the woman that draw the drawing had a problem with communication with their smart meter to the network, and there was also during Odyssey Polaris in the City Hall of the Hall of Nights, not the City Hall, the Hall of Nights. There was a reporter from the Financial Times in the Netherlands that also had a smart meter problem. So he experienced, well, not this one, but this one. So he got all in and did a really deep dive into the problems and called every stakeholder in the Netherlands that is having something to do with smart meter data. So we see this kind of problems, and it's a really small piece of the problem that we currently face, but it is needed to be solved. So it's not only like getting data from a smart meter and put it in a stack and run smart contracts on it, but how can we validate that the data is sent, and how can we say that it's connected? So it's more than just providing data or real-time data. It's really on the infrastructure layer. There are two more. Okay, so we need a drink afterwards because we only have 5 minutes left. What I can say is if you participate with a team and you're winning, then there will be a follow-up session, hopefully in May, with almost everybody who's has a how do you say that, verbeteraar, the changer. Yeah, so people who are willing to change for the greater good in the energy market. So we have a club called Club of Wageningen, based on the Club of Rome, but then on energy data and to make it inclusive. And the winning teams are invited to present their solution to that 120 people. So you are getting direct access to everybody in the industry, in the energy industry, to see your solution. So there's a good chance that you will get your solution will get out there and will be inspiring to change how we manage data. So we have time for 1 or 2 questions. So.
Yeah, I was wondering, because out of an individual user as a smart meter, there are a lot of reasons to have their data or know what they're using or how they are built. I was wondering in this, and also for the hackathon, on which level is this individual user data interesting for the grid operators? Because I think these are so granular, so small, and they have their grid meters and meters in the neighborhoods who are helping them to keep everything running. So this data, how relevant is it?
Let me give a few things on it. First, if you talk about data from the smart meter is capable of providing a lot of data, not only usage data, which goes to the suppliers. There's also data, for example, on power quality. Especially that's very relevant for us because we are obliged to keep the power within control specification, 230 volt plus or minus 10%. And when a lot of people feed in with solar panels, we might go out of it, and that might have a problem. On the other hand, on the users data, today the user data go to the market parties. They use that for billing, but the user data is also used for allocation, reconciliation, and settlement. That is the way how the market parties make use of the grid. And today that is done on profile data. And that means that the way how the financials are settled are not completely in the future, or maybe now already, corresponding to what actually happened. So there is a lot of discussion in the sector that we say, well, this type of data is also needed for the settlement between suppliers who put what on the grid and who use what from the grid. We call it allocation 2.0. And for that purpose, the data is also relevant. And those are the discussions which we're having with the ministry and with the privacy regulator as well. Maybe you want to add something?
A final question there? Or
Yes, I'm Ipe Kingma. I'm actually, I used to be on the board of a local energy corporation here in Delft, actually. So the question is, suppose you could have and use all the data without any privacy concerns. Then it would be possible then to give financial incentives to the houses, the prosumers. To what extent do you think such financial incentives would actually help?
So yeah, there was a pilot. I believe it was in Breda. I don't know. Is there someone involved in jouw energiemoment? No. So there was a pilot 2 years or 3 years ago about and they made the tax rate flexible, the grid connection or the grid tariffs flexible, and also the energy cost flexible. And there was a deviation from what was it, 0.1 cent until 50 cents per kilowatt hours based on the time. But I don't know the results of that challenge. Oh, thank you. Oh. Say very well. No. So there are some pilots there, and you can check that. It's jouw energiemoment. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh well.
So more in the coffee break.